당은 가상 당은 저기 코비 동안 탐지게 교육에 자와 탐지에 대한 가르라선 마릭 봤어야 돼. 덴진 마릭 봤어야 돼서. 자 덴진 마릭 봤어야 되려. 나 간에 질라 그래서나 아니 유디게 차상 아니 가서야 지나 뒤지게 취해 가는시나 유단建立 되는 줘. 중제 유단 建显起了对的主把讲嘛都유단 建立嘛对吧？那只干要嘛的想了嘛干要嘛的。이내 다 대소한 줄에 낭도 갑라 가는스 난거스네 강라에 마도바 랑응원이 주바시 나도 거래스 자 강라에 마도 랑응원이 줍되바데 요 말레스 디 안에 가자사 되르 가야 되가 줄롱을 나 가야 되레스 다 강라에 마도 랑응원이 나와 나시 다 강라에 랑응원이 주바시 진주게 진비로 되라 덴진 마리 파사지 덴진 마리 팔아 거래스 가사디 공아도 디고 쉬로라
And good morning. Last night we spoke about how all the suffering experiences that beings experience throughout samsara, they have as their root cause a particular consciousness, an ignorance, and amongst, as we saw in the text, the many types of ignorance. In particular, it's the ignorance of true grasping. Moreover, we looked at last night in the quotation from Nagarjuna, that all impermanent phenomena arise in dependence on causes and conditions. None arise in a way other than in dependence on causes and conditions. And whilst this is the case, what appears to our mind is that phenomena appear as if they are independent, as if they don't require causes to arise. So this is the meaning of true existence. And true existence is our object of negation. And moreover, the apprehending consciousness, the consciousness that apprehends true existence, this ignorance of true grasping, is also an object of negation.
지난 델라테네 덴지 마리바키리 디젤라 칼리기르스네 아니 뇽모바키고레스 아니 뇽모바키리 뇽모바키리 뇽모바디베네 되자 되 컨트롤라서 바케바네 뇽모 컨트롤시케바네 컨트롤원기 아니 셴리아 체위기 녀바 네비기 레가 자와치 되는 자와치는 레가 바사 아니 델레가 바사 안 레디원기 안마 안주야 코알이야 마소다 되는 마기와린비 기와린도 고레스 디자인 되네자 되네 기와린도 다 만주게 독딩이 풍부해야 될 레다 녀모 기와자 되네 독딩이 풍부될 내나서 망부여야다 안디 견전에 강한 망부해야 돼 디친의 용고레스 디자인 디조 차상게 제위 규디 덴지 마릭 파세드리 시 덴지 마릭 파세디 고 빵바이나 메가 쇠투바이나 아니 디제기 녀모 바다 아니 동아 요야다 군중이 다 돼서 차상 요야 말해서
As we also looked at in the sutra, in the quotation from Nagarjuna, that having the ignorance of true or self-grasping as the root cause of all our afflictions, there is the sequence. From this ignorance follows all our afflictions. Grasping at the self as existing in the way that it appears, all our other afflictions arise. Wanting things for ourselves, trying to repel things to protect ourselves. In this way, attachment and anger and so forth arise. And from these afflictions, actions follow. The mere arisal of the affliction, and certainly the expression of it, leads to the accumulation of contaminated karma. And the ripening of this leads to us being repeatedly reborn in samsara without respite. Again and again, life after life, taking rebirth with aggregates which are contaminated physical and mental aggregates. And having these, we experience suffering upon suffering. These have all again have as their root cause this ignorance of self-grasping. And as this is the root cause, should we eradicate it, eliminate it completely, that whole sequence stops. All the true origins, these afflictions and the resulting contaminated karma, are eradicated. So therefore, the ignorance of self-grasping has to be eradicated.
Dini zada ane dini ki tenzin di pangpa la panya liya tangpo ane ganas chik pangku kure la du dini ki tenzin pangpa di tongpa yi tope shera di tenzin di ki doksho ane tongpa yi tope shera kumbpa la dine pangku kure se tenzin di ki kare ziko se yu di ki nang yu de kangla ma da rang ngun dhuban zinti korwa da tongyi tope shera la du kangla ma da rang ngun dhuban me ba di tongwa tope ulo dirwa tenegi tonga tobe lo di gombala tene andi bangu res.
How does one eradicate the ignorance of true grasping? It's through cultivating a contrary mind, a mind that is completely opposite to it. What is opposite to ignorance? It is wisdom. And in particular, the ignorance of true or self-grasping, it's the wisdom realizing emptiness. So the ignorance of true grasping is a consciousness that grasps at phenomena as existing in the way they appear, as existing truly. And what is contrary to that? It's a wisdom that realizes phenomena do not exist in the way they appear. So one consciousness believes phenomena do exist in the way they appear, the other knows they do not exist in the way they appear. So therefore, ignorance and wisdom are completely contradictory.
Sanda tongyin tobi lo di kom de jene di pango ba na tongyin to ba lan dangbo samna kan stang ko ko la bi ndo na anzulia dangbo sosura samda sosuna lo ya nga se di lo di samda je nga se di samda de lo di ya nga de kan chagdu ye sambege del ba lo le ba nga de ba nang ha de le simbu che je di kan nang gu ye ba di ya wo ji dangbo di ha ko ko le se ko.
Recognizing the sequence then will give rise to the determination to cultivate the wisdom realizing emptiness. So how to do so? The first step, a crucial step, is to recognize how phenomena appear to us. So taking the self or our sense of self-identity as the illustration, we need to recognize clearly how this appears to us.
Dini gedan du sine simju che de jing so su ge nga se be samlo de liang nga de na de nga de gang la ya ma so su ge phung bo da cha xie gang la ya ma de rang gung ne zhu de yan ji neng go le se ne ji na na de den neng du wa san be ge da na ya de den neng du gang la ya ma de ba ko rong wen ne zhu de ba neng du da den ji na wa na xin ji gang la ya ma de ko rong wen ne zhu de ba ji du ge min du se simju che de da nga ju ge nga se de 다 소수기 땡 알아서 소수 삼당 공모인자 소수에 때도 심지적으로 마도 소소래 신 치료들이 제가 자요 말다 소수 때도 심지적으로 심지적으로 해지래다. 디말 소소랑 검도 소수기 풍부에 때도 심지어만 미션다게 풍부에 때도 제가 제스가요 말아. 그래서 소수기 나 소소랑 삼도네 나세 낭수디 나와 나신지 같이 두스 비집에 다 소수기 풍부에 가리 때도 두 민도 시아바 제고 해지네.
How does the self, like all other phenomena, appear to us? Well, the term usually used is appears as truly existent. In other words, that the way it appears is how we believe it to exist. So how, therefore, does it appear? It appears as if it is independent. It does, and being independent means that the self appears as if it doesn't rely on anything else. It's unconnected to anything else. In other words, our sense of self doesn't require our physical and mental aggregates. It's something independent of anything else, such as our physical and mental aggregates. It appears to be something fixed, static, self-existent. So this is the first step of the meditation, to really get to see clearly how the self appears to us. Then we investigate to see if this appearance is in accordance with how it exists in reality or not. That then is the second step. And here we need to investigate within our own aggregates. seeking it is for the self to see where it can exist. And we don't look elsewhere in the world. It can only be here, within our own aggregates.
Subudile in and the Shashe Mangua, Subudi Nalea, and the Bene Sha, Bagua, Rugo, Chasan, and the Chasan Narebe, Shadia, Rangarebe, Rugo de Angarebe, do some Davane, Di Marwa, Dine some Dane, the Chago, Dine, Naman Ushu Chadogorova, Jizan, the Hachago Mare, those, the end, Dine, Subuding in some Relamna, Gundinity to us. And the Mazadus and Subuding Aina, then Nashi Rodu. Nge subudi mewa chadu kure. Tene nga di mewa chawa rebes. Nga mewa chana an jewa chimal doya yo marwa. Ta jewa chima yo ma dine an jige nyawa doya sayada lai go wang top sayada di mene an tarbada tamji kimbi go wang top sayada diya ragi mi doas. Jeza di subudi nga reme sus. Jeza subudi le losu nga chi doas. Subudi losu chawa dang subudi nga reme doas. Dine ki samdaya reda.
Again, the first step of the meditation is to see clearly for ourselves, or to get a clear sense for ourselves of how the self appears. And when we get to recognize how it appears to be independent, not requiring, not having any relationship to the physical and mental aggregates, we then seek such a self to see if it can be found. And as I mentioned in the previous segment, it's not going to be found elsewhere in the world. It can only be found here, within our physical and mental aggregates. So we then embark on the second step of investigation, and we seek throughout the 5 aggregates, the aggregates of form, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness, looking for this independent self, the self that appears to exist by way of its own essence or nature. Because if it does exist in this way, should be findable. What appears to us should be findable. So let's take as an illustration the first aggregate, the form aggregate, or our body. To seek out the form aggregates in here, in our body, we do so through relying on reasons. Firstly, if our body were our body, or our form aggregate, were our self, what faults would follow from that? So firstly, our body very clearly has many parts. It has the coarser parts, such as the limbs, and within that, subtler parts down to the atomic level. And we can readily recognize that none of these individually would be is our sense of self. But this body has many parts, but the self appears to us as being independent. In other words, not dependent on parts. So this is clearly contradictory. Moreover, then that's the first point. So seeing how the body has parts, but the self appears to be partless, to be independent of parts. Then the second reason to apply is that we know death will come. And when death comes, this body dies, and it quickly wastes and rots. So if our body were our self, the self should die then too. The self should be extinguished in the same way as the body is. And if that were the case, there would be no future lives. There would be no possibility of attaining rebirth in an upper realm or the lower realms. There would also be no possibility of progressing towards liberation and Buddhahood life to life. Because this life would be all that there is. When the body dies, the self would die too, if the body and the self were identical.
samdana jigla ganas tangorelana da phungbo seade ngazu phungbo seade tu samdade ganis trugore la de da sosara phungbo de dangbo an meingal ne su jungor bada meingal ne jungor de la chungchung mata yo ma dele ya ne garin 것은 an din이 대야제 가와가와 기고 파 심주제데 밤에 아니 밤에 쿠자 뒤발했더니 뒤네 안 din마 디 지게 밤에게다 뒤사회절이야 아메기 세당 류기 주기 누발했더니 두두스 철철철철 차제 안저 마 제대로 수부 철사 당안저 아메기에 차베네 당안저기 수부디 지고 아메 오마동야다 칼라다 되네기 전이야 철철 차도 제상 안저 수부디 yen gyudan gen mangbo chile tuyene chupti gaji shenla tuyene chupti gaji cheza da ngazu subu de gasa inna deshi ngazu lola nawa na shin gasa chinna lola nawa na gasa gare gala ma de khorong suji le ma de khorong wone chupti ba cha de ro cheza ngazu subu de ga nawa na shin gasa de inna da gasa subu de gala ma de ba rang wone chupti ba jing go le cheza da subu de gala ma de ba re mi do gyudan gen mangbo chile tuyene dugu was 제자다 링이 가다 차기로 와서 가서 수부디 규단기 망고 초발에 되는 주용도 대신 나와나지 나디 있나 갈라에 맞여 봐지도 용고데 링이 가다래시 제가 숙디 갈라에 맞여 랑원의 주바지 레미도 와서 갈라에 맞여 봐지 레미도 규단기 망고를 뛰고도 제가 가서 나 갈라에 맞여 랑원 주바 나와나시 나디 있나 갈라에 맞여 봐신 거래 대 수부디 규단기 망고를 되는 주고도 와 저 수부디 나 레미도 와서
Two reasons have been presented thus far. The second being that if the self were the body, the self would be extinguished when the body is extinguished. And the first was that the self, despite appearing to be independent and therefore not requiring parts, the body clearly is comprised of many parts. Now, the third reason that you can utilize in your reflection is that how did this form aggregate, this body, come about? How did it arise? It came about due to our parents sleeping together and conceiving, the sperm and egg coming together and conception happening. And not only that, then we grew over a period of time in our mother's womb, and in that period of time, we were completely dependent on our mother. She had to eat nutritious food, to care for us, take care of her behavior so that we weren't harmed, and so forth. So this whole process, from the point of conception up to birth, and then of course from birth to now, we reflect on how many causes our body was dependent on so as not to die, so that it could grow and be healthy. So here we can readily recognize our body is dependent on causes. But our sense of self, though, appears to be independent. But our body is dependent on causes. So therefore, our body cannot be found, our self cannot be found in our body, because the self appears to be independent, whereas the body is dependent, both as we saw earlier on parts, and now also dependent on causes.
데네게 삼다다 다 더디더리 삼다나 가도 도시네 삼다에 되네 나저기 수포디 땅아데리 민도아 선비게 다디 수포디 나저기 민도 선비게 다디니 나디나 나데 갈라마다 랑원 주바 나와 나신지 임바이나 수포디 데네 시샬라마 되바 신고 수포디 데네 레미도 지자 수포디 규단기 샹라 되고도 샹라 땡진 자와 중화레도아스 지자다 데네기 네 나와 나신 갈라마 랑원이 주바데 책임도 제가 데네사 나와데 가데 레미도 선비게다 섬데 수포디 가지기 민도 선비게 섬을 레행으로 다 데네 마지난다 니베들다 소화하다 나 소화된 아래베 수포디 가만다 소화된 아래베선 다 소화디 나다다 나와 나신 가랑원이 주바디 소화된 아래 레기나 다 견가려 요래서 양심치 제바 제야들이.
There are 3 brief points that you can utilize in your meditation. They follow from first recognizing how our sense of self appears, something as real, as true, and then seeing, well, can such a self be found in our body? Is our body that sense of self? And through those 3 reasons, we see that it cannot be. We come to the conclusion, I am not my body. I'm not identical with my body. In this way, we start to break our grasping at the self as existing in the way that it appears. That then was a brief presentation on how one can meditate on the first of the 5 aggregates. Then with the second feeling, it's the same. One starts at the same process by utilizing reasonings, looking for faults. So if the self existed in the way that it appears, what faults would follow? So just like we did with the body, we apply that same process to the second aggregate, that of feelings.
So that's how nga sa na de shi da na sam da na ji ba da nga sa lo pa na de ka lai ma de ko rang ngui ni zhu de nga ji lo na wa neng go ba de ni na wa na shi nga de da cho wa de rebes je ba na da cho wa de rebes sam na da du sam dang go re da cho wa de ya cho wa de wa da du ma da dang yum mang bu yong de sum ga cho wa de wa de ya nga re du nga de ya nga re dang yin de ya nga re sin nga sum cha ro go wa nga sum nga ji ma de yo ma ro wa da ngo nga sum cha go Dinashi to say this sum de regminu. Nasum your laya maris diacha. And Dinena, Tayanti Gabriel saw de Okorong in Lamna, Gabriel saw Lugim, but the saw Dumaski and do saw de Yomaris. That thing I omaribesine, now you're a Dunga Yungula war watching. Just not saw de Wadi and Rigmiduas. And saw Dunga de Nadibe Jigulamna. So dunga de nga rigmin karsan so dunga de nga re lamna so dunga de mewa so dewa dela na chen dunga de mewa mares chesa da di so dunga mewa za nga yo mare la gorbas so dunga de nga ina chesa nga yo nga ji du la gorbas chesa du samtan so dewa da dunga time de ne ja nga rigmin was du samtan nga ji rigmin dos den du cheva che da.
Just like with the preceding aggregate, that of the form of the body, with feelings we start by looking at the logical faults that would follow if the self were the feeling aggregate. The self appears as being independent and unchanging, truly existent. So now our feelings, we know we have more than one. The Buddhism divides it into 3, feelings of pleasure, feelings of pain, and equanimous feelings. So there are 3 feelings. Am I all 3? Do I have 3 senses of self? Well, that's ridiculous. I only have one sense of self, but I have a variety of feelings. So that's the first contradiction. I cannot be all 3 feelings, because then I would have to have 3 selves. Now the second point. Well, what then if I was only one? If I can't be all 3, well then I'm only one of them. So let's say the feeling of happiness. If I'm this feeling of happiness or this feeling of pleasure, I am happy. If I am that happy feeling, what happens when I'm unhappy, I'm suffering, I'm in pain? Happy feeling is not at all present. Am I now non-existent? And then when happiness later arises, I suddenly arise? Of course not. And nor is the contrary possible, that if I am the suffering feeling, if this feeling of suffering is me, what happens when that passes and I'm having a good day and I'm in a happy mood? I'm not suffering. Am I now non-existent? Of course, that's illogical. So we recognize that this sense of self cannot be found in the feelings either.
Nga said to nine the she Nana Dagara something as 9 the Kalama rang when you juba Nangore. Just nga said Yina Toa the Naina, Kalama rang when you juba Shingu, Kalamadu Shingu was. Just in another Toa the Karachigos and Penanga Gabrielia, Janvi Rachalet in a Janvi Rachachuban, Delatin and Toa Dumakia, the Chade Dumakia, Savi Dumayana, and the Toa Dumay, Sawalatine, and the Toa Dumakia. Gabriel Yanchik Yanchik Pe Chadi Gabriel 조여지리에도 작자 조여지리에도 초와 대랑나기야. 제가 아주 초와기에디 아니 루시게 초와디기는 현실에 뛰는 기도가 지금 현실에 뛰는 기고로 봐. 현실에 뛰는 기고도. 근데 나도 이기 시에 초와이네. 나도 소소라는 게 지금 미유 죽고에 된다디 죽나 디주발에 때는 소소려 셈내 초와 가랑나기야지. 소소기 된다 죽고에 마주바제 아니 이 강을 채베네 아니 마주바이나 안디 견진 소와 안에 마키발이야 중국어. 제가한테 소화세 소화기에 차상 그냥 현실에 뛰는 주도 와서 그냥 현실라 마되바 소화의 영향 민도스. 제가 소화세의 그냥 현실에 뛰는 주도 뛰어바지래샤스. 제가 나세대 강라에 마되 랑은데 나 나와나신 같이 있나? 강라에 마되고 그런 원이 주도 신고래. 제가 소화세의 현실에 뛰는 주도 나 나와나신 같이 있는 강라 모두에다 랑원의 주바이 디데 가와차기도 제가 디네자 소화세의 현실을 뛰는 주부도 강라 모두가 디 차기면도 제가다 나와나신 같이 소화돼야 되면도스.
So in addition to those two contradictions, which rely on reflecting on dependency on parts, so there are three parts to feelings, three types of feelings. One continues the reflection, looking at the contradictions that if the self were identical with the aggregate of feeling. And we can see, for example, that whilst the self appears to be independent, self-existent, existing from its own side, feelings are clearly not so. If we touch something cold or we touch something hot, suffering arises. If we experience warmth or coolness, happiness arises. So feelings clearly are dependent. Similarly, when our interactions with others or events go in accordance with my wishes, happiness arises. When the situation changes and now things go against my wishes, suffering arises. Again, clearly, feelings are dependent. Whereas the self appears as being independent. Dependent, independent, contradictory. The self appears as if it is independent, not influenced by anything at all. Whereas feelings, we recognize, clearly are influenced by other things. They are dependent on causes as well as having parts. So we see here that the self cannot be the aggregate of feelings. It's clearly contradictory.
제가 두신의 삼당인데 두 디네 제바제바나 디네 가지 수부대야 나와나싱가데 말에 소화대야 나와나싱가데 말에 된 두시에다 두제 넘버 쉐바대야 나와나싱가데 말에 진짜 부모가보 나가 차상 가데 차고 말 다이나 맨날 부모가데 가가 샤바네 부모가들의 로소 가지 풍봉아들의 마딘비고 로소 아니 가디 나와나지 가디 가요래 된 주주nye 민도 nye 말해지래 이 말에서 nye 매버 제자다 나와나지 가디 두스제바잖아 나와나지 가디 딱 풍봉아버들의 로소 메딘딜라 마딘비 제와 메디게 풍봉아버들의 제와 메디게 가디 다 통고 말 이거 말와
The self that appears to be independent cannot be found in the body or the feelings. Nor, if we continue looking at the other aggregates of discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness, no such self can be found. No such self that is identical with any of the aggregates can be found. So if the self is not identical with the aggregates, or usually translated as one or the same as the aggregates, is it different or separate or unrelated to the aggregates? No connection with the aggregates. Now we search there too. So we first search for the self as being identical with each of the aggregates, and we cannot find it. So if it's not identical with the aggregates, is it different or unrelated? And there too, we cannot find a self that is unconnected, unrelated to the aggregates.
소소를 나와나지 가디 강라이와 랑문이 주바 나와나시 가지 다 니가 말 민도와스 다음에 되니 나와나시 가디는 민도 일단 가요 말이 베스다 다 삼리그로 다 가요 말이 베스네 나메나 내가 digi dugo danda lega lega mina nga sangi go ba to go se da ngi shen le pamba dugo se bi ge an lega lega kai mi no was 진짜 nga yo ma re be se ne da di wo ni ba shi le yo da de shi na wa na xin rang wo ne zhe be nga di pong pong nge dian du ni ne pong pong nga de re mi do de le lo so ji ne ye ra gi mi do da me nan da nga yo ma re be se da ji da ne nga se da nga yo ma re be se ji ji wo chi sam lo shi li ko go wa da.
This process of analysis we could divide into two main sections. So that was the first, where we're looking at the faults if the self was identical with any of the five aggregates, and that has another section following, or what about it being different from any of the five aggregates? So those two are part of the first section of the analysis. This then leads us to a conclusion which brings us to the next part, which is seeing that our self, which appears as being self-existent, as independent, is not identical with any of the aggregates, nor different from the aggregates. Does the self then not exist? And this should lead to questions for us. Because if I do not exist at all, because I've looked and I cannot find my I know I want to be happy. So how do I say, I want to be happy, I want to attain freedom from suffering, but I don't exist? This doesn't make sense. So we continue here to look.
다 나도 수불야 안 수부딜에 나 지게 내 나서 충분히나 나 나기도 해야다. 나도 수부디 바구교마다 제 카지를 되되베나 나 되여서 두체되다 나셔야지 수기 풍보를 까불래 수기 풍보를 파뢰파 따바점 나셔야지 수기 풍보를 따네 샤베 나지 두스 제가 수기 풍보를 되네 샤베 나지 두마도 두 세비기다 나셔야지 당한주님 어떤 알레가 얘기해 나 두고요 나 칼라사고요 차상 수기 풍보를 되네 샤고를 제가 다 도시 삼던 수기 풍보를 되네 마치 샤기도 후수요 여바디 도 세야지 통과하다.
Here then we think to ourselves, to be able to say that I am sitting or I am going somewhere, we can only state that I am sitting, I am going, independence on my body. Similarly, I'm ill. We can only make the statement that I am ill, independence on our body. And I am eating, or I am not eating. We can only state independence on my body. So therefore, we can see that the way that I exist is imputed or designated or labeled by mind onto the body. That's how it exists. We've searched for the I within the body to see if it's identical or different or within the body, couldn't find it. But how the I exists is independent on labeling onto the body.
맞아요. 초와 대상 하시게도 엉아기부도 세거든. 초와 동아기도 엉아기부 민도라고. 지사다 근데 초와 땅님도 다 근데 시에샤사. 지사디 차상 초와를 띠네. 초와 대화치기도 나 대부도라도 나 세야디. 나 대부도 세야디. 근데 초와 대화들 파 떼네. 나 샤용을 샤샤고. 지사 초와 나 동아기부 민도 초와 동아기도 나 기부 민도라도 초와 동아들 떼네. 같이 샤고. 제가 나서야지 다 뛰네 봐샤고지. 야나 가브릴레 수를 뛰네 샤고. 가브릴레 초와를 뛰네 샤고래. 가브릴레 양은 저기 두실을 뛰네 샤고래. 직시한 뛰네 퐁퐁하고 강로질 파 뛰네 샤고래 저리다.
Similarly, with feeling, that we can say I am happy or I am unhappy is dependent on the feeling that has arisen. We recognize then, just like with the body, there is imputation or labeling by mind onto a particular feeling. Because a feeling of happiness has arisen, we can label the self onto this feeling of happiness. I am happy. So onto our feeling aggregate, the sense of self is labeled. So what we see is that our sense of self-identity, is sometimes labeled by mind onto the body, sometimes it's labeled by mind onto the feeling, or any of the other aggregates. So this is the conventionally existent self.
다다 책임이었다. 나요 뭐인에서 나한테 가르쳐 주스는 현실을 뛰네 외대 줍디 바지레샤스 나디. 진짜 나도 갑라 강라에마도 그런 원에 줍디 남기도. 진짜 나도 디다 뭐인에서 니도 퉁금이도. 뭐인에서라 마세야디 현실을 뛰네 줍바지레샤스. 진짜 나도라 현 뛰네 줍바 만나제 랑 원에 줍 남기도. 진짜 나도다 뭐인에서 니도 퉁금이도 와서 배삼 리고로 받아.
Having gone through this meditation, the conclusion we have now arrived at is that the self, the way the self appears to us as being independent or self-existent, this does not exist at all. We've searched. It's not identical with the aggregates. It's not different from the aggregates. That self doesn't exist at all. It's non-existent. But the self that does exist is the self that is merely imputed or labeled by mind onto the 5 aggregates, or onto any of the 5 aggregates. So here we see that there is discord or contradiction between the way the self appears and the way it abides. There's contradiction or discord between appearance and existence. This is the conclusion we come to.
어두스 진의 심주 제도 나 가르 다디 디젤라 삼로 갈리게 됐으나 제가 대신 나와 나신치 부봉이 나네 가르두스 제바제나 니 토마소스 나랑 뭐네 주바 간래 마도 랑 뭐네 주바디 나와 나진 가디 부봉이 때도 가르르세 제바도 부봉하고 가야 많긴 되는가디 니마 토마소스 다 니바 심주 삼때 나세야디 현실 부봉바 가르르 파 뢰파 Dine shapa, dine yobadi, di tonsons, rada hawsons, rada. Da hawazan and the carrezlane, rang nang the gala kala mother rang when to be now nashi chingadi, mindu semping, never chinging yong, dinena, that cansa, the mama to tobares, pompany tobares.
Then, through this process, we've come to recognize that the self that appears to us, that's truly existent or independent self, a self that's independent from the aggregates, not reliant or related to them, doesn't exist. But the self that does exist is a self that is merely labeled by mind onto any of the aggregates. And in this way, we come to see that phenomena do not exist in the way that they appear. They are empty of existing in the way they appear. And this consciousness that understands us is the wisdom understanding emptiness.
Dus chebachi sosorangi that dus samtangi chebachi chikabla sosoralia the nyamyong tone and the nyamyoro san ligorwa denizan dusre in the chebachi rawaru chiti ni jishuene dineshe. 지다 당하는 저기 직 현실을 뛰네 빼네 기단 심으셔야 돼. 기단 디키레 디심을 해야 돼. 여와셔야 돼. 기단 심이. 기단 디키레 디심을 해서 여와셔야 줘로 봐. 가를 때는 여와치고서 수부될 때는 여와치고로 수부될 때는 디 Shimire, the Kires, Subu de la Dune Yawachema, the Shan Yawache to Eskayamarwa. Subu the man at the Kida Kiri, the Shimire Yawachemero. Jeza Kida Kise, the Kida Shimini, and the Subula Dune, the Kiri, the Shimires, and Subula Dune, Queen Yawachigdua.
This meditation I've outlined, it's coarse, it's easy to intellectually understand, but what's crucial is that we all apply ourselves to this meditation repeatedly so that we gain experience of this. This is how we come to gain transformation and integration of this topic. And not only to the self, but to all objects we can apply this. For example, take a dog and a cat. How can we differentiate a dog and a cat? It only depends on their body. Independent on the one being's body, we label dog, and on the other being's body, it's suitable to be labeled cat.
Now, Jiki Simjandi Dires Yawache, Hosubullet Yawache Guruma. Then a Kichibula sometime Diki Gabore, Diki Nabure said, Gorong Bundo de Gabos Yena, Diki Gabores. Bundo get the Nabos Yena, Diki Nabure said, Chizanki Nabore, Kigabores Yawache, Go Bundo della Cado della Pui, Cado della Dune, and Yawachema, the Shan,
This, of course, is the case with all animals. When independent on their body, they are suitable to be labeled in a particular way. And not just with their body does it work like this, but also their characteristics. So independent on the color of for example, a dog's fur, that dog will be labeled a black dog or a white dog. And this comes about independent on a characteristic. And this particular characteristic is the color of their fur.
Gaboyam, Nahoyam, Karam, the Kiri and the Gabo Naholam, Puram, do Allegro, just a Digabore, Dinabore, Latia Yomarwa.
And if, for some strange reason, we were to take this black or this white dog and shave all its fur off, and then we are to say to someone who doesn't know this dog, what color is this dog? Is it black or is it white? Person will not only think it's a very strange question, they will have no suitable basis to label this dog either black or white. They will not be able to reply that this dog is white or it's not white. They will have no basis to label its characteristic in this way. This then was a very simple presentation on how to first recognize how the object appears, seek it, and then how it does exist, independence on labeling by mind.
And then again, that answer is Tony to Sinchevache Kansam, and Gabriela, and Bitch, the Kaya do Simchis, Kaya Mindo Sempigi, and the Pacheda Huyage, Ningasia, or as a dead paratilia, Chizan, Diniki Chevache to Gabriela, that Chiki Lamigi, and the Chiki Tamata, then the Sosuke, Dalia, and Chik cost. Riparuchi, water, Jimmy, Machivana, Chick to Chivacham, Chick Church, the money to the Kaya Minua, Sampegi, Chag and Yangayo, Chesa Diniki Chebachi to Kablia, Digi, Kansa, the Niba, Samtanajin, and the Canis to do that may have a Canis Chagri, the Chick Zidu, Danger Jawachu or sometime or Chesa Danger Jawachu or sometime they could Cheta to Kumade.
Not only do I urge you to engage in this meditation regularly, but I also encourage you to engage in the meditation in its entirety. Because if one doesn't, one creates the habit, the habituation that can lead to a very mistaken outcome. If one just searches for the truly existent object and doesn't find it and realizes emptiness and leaves it there, one may well at some point come to the wrong conclusion. Phenomena do not exist. So there's a grave danger that through not completing this process of analysis correctly, one can fall into the extreme of non-existence, believing that things, because they are empty, they do not exist.
And then do sometimes that jig cholia mitewigi canza karina sempe that jig mindua sempe dinegi chola canza jig yor sudo da nganzu de so so nyamnyo marda denegi jebaje duchi de cholia gabriele henaji hensor da dine yungure sudo wa da kaya meba charu du sempe denegi nga mindua sempe ya jig ngo semlia denegi chola shukchembo ya da dine yonsi yungure sudo wa.
And this is important to do because one may well come to a point of fear arising within oneself, thinking, nothing exists, I don't exist, nothing exists. And that then would be a wrong conclusion to come to.
다 동방이 또 베셔로 공발라 동방이 또 호고래 다 동방이 또 발라 안에 간에 삼당고래 해야지 안 두시는 아주 네디지 대지로 라바라바로 쉬어야지 삼당하디 되네시 해야 돼 쉬어야지 쉬버려.
Last night then and today, what we've looked at is first recognizing that grasping at phenomena as existing in the way they appear, this is the root cause of all our suffering. Because it's from this, all our afflictions and contaminated karma arises. But there is something that we can do about this. We can cultivate a wisdom that is in accordance with reality, realizing that phenomena are empty of existing the way they appear. They're empty of existing truly. And we've also then looked at how to cultivate this wisdom realizing emptiness.
Ada din ma kasa di ma da din ma jam chiki ma te shi ja de kar sung ros ne de ji lu jindang ge da gam ga cha me zam la da me dang de me dong yi se ros.
Let's turn to the text. So in page 19, the paragraph just below the quotation. The mere non-existence of the object of negation, which is the object of the mode of apprehension of that awareness of ignorance, is called selflessness, not truly existent, and emptiness. So just to say as an aside here, in this paragraph there are a couple of bits that, if you wish, you can put in brackets. The first of which, in addition to we have here of ignorance in brackets, you can put in the object of in the first line. That's not in the Tibetan, it's an addition.
Diri sirim disi nyele shayadi si or desiyadi nyele layadi nyele karashiya sonsene dujigi chetam ju gyudan jenle dine jigo warde susole nandu kapla gangla ima da rangu wani drupa nangu warde ese chasan gangla ima da rangu wani drupa si war diri lu jindang sido lu digi jindanga yudi si war lu digi gangla ima rangu wani drupa jingo warwa chasan di yudi karel na gangla ima rangu wani drupa diri chasan diri lu jindang dargi is the Zinda Yu disorder, Kala Rangwin Juba disorder. Della Mingala da like this, da like the Kansa da said the then the Kansa da said the Kansa and Chiki da said the Kala Matu Rangwin Juba di Lagores. De Gacha like this, Gacha said, she's a dark Gachas.
The mere existence of the object of negation. So what is this object of negation? This is, as we have been looking at now previously, is that objects appear to us as being independent. And as we saw in the verse, we have here all phenomena, but really it's all impermanent phenomena, arise in dependence on causes and conditions. Despite appearing as being independent, they're actually dependent. And then we have a consciousness that grasps that phenomena as existing in the way they appear. So this then is the object of negation. The mere non-existence, or the object of negation, or the object of refutation, which is the object of the mode of apprehension of that awareness of ignorance. So the Tibetan is the order here is opposite from the Tibetan. It starts with that awareness, and in brackets, of ignorance. So the of ignorance is the ignorance that grasps at phenomena as existing in the way they appear when they do not. And its object of the mode of apprehension, or the engaged object, is the object of negation. So yeah, that's the way it's written in Tibetan. Just reading a sentence from halfway. The awareness of ignorance, so the awareness that grasps at phenomena as existing in a way they appear when they do not, has as its object of the mode of apprehension the object of negation. So this is the ignorance of true grasping itself. And this is called selflessness, not truly existent emptiness. So again, now it didn't say that. He said, and this is called the selflessness of persons, or the selflessness of phenomena.
On the rangungun Jubatilla, Gata Lagre, and it Gaja Lagres. Cesada rangungun Jubé Tomba, Gaja de Meba Zamdel, Meba Zamla, Tomba Della, and a Dameba, Meba Zamla, Dame like Dameba, say Lagre, and Demba Meba and Delagore, Tomba is and Delagore, Gabriel Dame Balagre, Demba Meba Lagre, Tomba Lagre, Cesada, Gaja de Tombi, Tomsam de Gaja de Marubi, Dubi, Tomba Della, that. Mingala Dame Lagre, Dime Lagre, Tombani Lagres, Tombani Seras.
The second half of the sentence is called selflessness, not truly existent, and emptiness. So the mere non-existence of the object of negation is called selflessness. The mere non-existence of the object of negation is called not truly existent, or lack of true existence, and it's called emptiness. The emptiness, the lack of true existence is called emptiness. The lack of true existence is called non-true existence. The lack of a truly existent self of persons or phenomena is called selflessness.
And Tardube Nilu Yimba, Donam Dembares, to Serras. Cesar, Dele, Chetamja Rang when you to be Tomba de la Digi, Dame Balagre, Tembar Mebala, Tombani like Resua. Cesar, Denis, Denigi, Chetaja Rang when you to be Tomba di, and Chejan Tamji and Chekari in the Yore, Chetamji in the Yores. Cesar Chetamje and Pugi de Lugres, Pula, Winesula, Denisiries, the Kalama, the Rang when you to be Tomba de Resort. Deni Chechen Namki Pugi de Lugin said, Chesan Kala Yamado Rang when you Truba Tombadi, Chechen Chekanachina, digging we Nesudi, Dires, we Nixude. Pugi de Lux, Zawadi Teneres. Oh, Pugi de Lux said,
The next sentence. Just this is the innermost way of existing, or the final way of abiding of all phenomena. Therefore, it is called an ultimate or final truth. So here first, as a translator, just to say, if you wish, you can put this or final, which is between commas. You can put it between brackets, because that's an addition. This term ultimate in English has more than one meaning. But the meaning in the Dharma is not the more common English meaning of ultimate, which is like best or supreme, but the meaning is final, as in the final truth. And likewise, in the sentence or the line immediately above, the final way of abiding could be the ultimate way of abiding. But again, this word ultimate can be misunderstood as meaning the best way of abiding, the supreme way of abiding. And that's not it. It's the final way when that objects abide. Okay, so that's from my side now to Genda's commentary. So we start here with the term just this. So just this then refers to emptiness, the emptiness of the object of negation. So the emptiness of the object of negation is the innermost way of existing. So this term innermost way of existing, we can understand as how all phenomena exist in reality. When one analyzes and comes to recognize that whatever object one is investigating is empty, empty of existing in the way that it appears. This is its innermost way of existing, or its innermost mode of existence, or way of abiding, abiding's later, innermost way of existing.
푹이 되루라 푹서나 자와시로 자위게 자와데 파 짐지데 디레 시로다 최신 남기 푹이 되룩세데 푹이 되루는 자와데 파 심지지 파 탈투바데 시로 탈투바데 디레 시로다 진짜 탈투바데 가레라나 강라이마다 랑원이 집에 똥바디레서 최간의 지인의 최신 남세도 뒤지게 최나라 뒤마지게 최나 간의 최간의 지인의 차상 파 심지지도 바지도 코코 자와라 자위 탈둑들라 강라이마다 랑문을 주표 똥바들이 돼요. 그래서 그러다지 전다지로 랑문을 주표 똥바들이 푹세야 돼. 파자와 탈둑바지 제거를.
This term innermost, or elsewhere translated as deepest, so we haven't come across this term before, but the meaning is like it can be said to be the root or the final. So what we have here is find the innermost way that something exists is that it's empty, empty of being truly existent or self-existent. And this applies to all phenomena, whether impermanent, changing phenomena, or permanent, unchanging phenomena. All of them have as their innermost way of existing that they are empty, empty of self-existence.
안디나신다 탈두베 내루 임베스 지사다 최간에서 강라이마도 랑원의 주변 동바디 탈두르에서 탈두베 내루들이에서 지사 탈다 짐주전에 딜레라 예요 말레스 강라이마도 바 간에서 두송어 간에서 두바 제바제는 담이 다주다 강라이마도 랑원의 주변 동바디 동구레스 랑원의 주변 동바디 동구르마다 딜레라다 동 딜레 로스 통해야 말. 세상 탈두바디레스다. 통해야 탈두바디. 세상 최근에 진짜 그런 거 내루 의인에서 탈두바디 다 강라마도 랑원이 좀 동바디레스 그래. 내루 탈두빈베. 지발에 거기 랍당을 칙 베지다나 하던다 지발.
Then the second term, which is also probably the first time it's come up in our text, the final way of abiding, sometimes translated as the ultimate way of abiding. But final is correct because this word literally means touching the limit or touching the extreme. So it's the final way of abiding. Its meaning is identical to the innermost way of existing. It's just a different way to express the same meaning. That when one examines any phenomenon, whether a permanent or impermanent phenomenon, its final way of abiding is just this, the mere existence of the object of negation, emptiness.
다텔라 돈담바 세라스 제가 최탐체 탈둑 내룩 탈둑 강라마도 랑문의 주변 동바디 내룩 탈둑세 내루 탈도 시나레 덴발 마두바 똥니라나 데멜라나 다멜라나 니 돈다지바 잘 내루 탈도 델라 민갈라서 돈남 덴바라 거래지 돈나 덴바세라스 내루 탈도 될라 돈남 덴바세라스 동바니 다메바 덴버메바 돈남 덴바세데 돈나지바레지.
And it concludes, therefore it is called an ultimate truth. And again, because it's clearer, I prefer final truth. But ultimate truth is what we're used to in every text. So ultimate truth is the meaning, is the final way that objects abide. It's their innermost way of existing. So we're seeing here, these are different ways of expressing the inexpressible. Because there are many synonyms here. We can say, instead of saying ultimate truth, one can say emptiness, or selflessness, or not truly existent. These are all synonymous. The emptiness of inherent existence is the ultimate truth, is the final truth. These are synonymous. And this is the final way that objects abide, or their innermost way of existing.
De topic lola, don't topic lo serves. Chisang de topic lola, don't topic lo serves. Chisang don't topic lo said the Kanachi Legrilana, that Chet Hamja Rang when to be Tongba said that Donam de Basin, de topic lo della, and don't topic lo like yesterday.
And the paragraph concludes, an awareness that realizes it is called an awareness realizing emptiness. And the it that is realized is that all phenomena are empty of inherent existence. The consciousness that then realizes that all phenomena are empty of inherent existence is called an awareness realizing emptiness.
지난 다이 딩이 기대 된단 덴바 세르세지 도와 돈음 덴바 세르세지 지난 되 담바 덴바 세야되다 곧 돈은 덴바 세르세지 대신에 세야돼 지난 되 세야돼 담바 세야돼 덴바 세야돼 곧 간지 돈은 덴바 랍고에기 곧 니수 김자로시 고 되세데 가래 담바 세데 가래 덴바 세데 가래 세야지 두시네 돈담 덴바 세야지 공고래.
So let's have a look at this meaning of the term ultimate or final truth. So it's comprised of three particles. The first is dön, the second is dam, and the third is denpa.
dön se de kare lamna da de jinyel se ge dongban yin se gore. De 담바 라디 동반이 도베 동반 모습도베 캠바데라 담바 라고래 동반이 모습도베 캠바라네 람레 캠바라 그와 저 전시 심비기 캠바스로 동용 모습도베 로지 다 단다라 동용도 셰스 준다 동용 모습도베 캠바스고래 셰사 마신 동용도베 동용 모습도베 로라 그래 상이 얘네 상이 유기 로라 캠바라 그와 나 주기라 로 마디 캠바라 말와 디나지 다 동용 모습도베 로데라 동용 모습도베 캠바스고로 이제 담바 라비도 가래라네 담바 라디 동용어스도 별로데 담바 약보세요래 지자 동이 똑비게로 던지 똑바디게 가서 그 템버트가 난 거를 추추되어 동이 또거데 이네 추셔야돼요 다 동용어스도 별로디 유 동방에 또네 가야 맞추와 달로 돈담바 약쇼디 동용어스도 캠바들이다 또 별로데 제가 담바 세야디 동용 옷은 또 비게 파비규기다 파비규 동용 옷은 비 캠바텔라 담바 세시고래 단 되는데 가래람나 유 랑신 주변 동방이 그런 되는데세 다딘 동바데 덴바래라도 가래라데 동방이 옷은 또 별로디고 또바 나신 너는 내되어레스 제산디 덴바레스 노주 말레스 그래 덴바레스 뭐네레스 그래 제산 된담 덴바라도 동방이 옷은 또 비게 로 담바 디기 유게 또 바나시 되는 다가라 레디오레스 세미 인자 콜이야 되는 덴바 세 동반이들 민 되는 덴바라고 김세계를 되는 덴바라도 유 동반 용어선 또 유디 또 바나시 다가랑 뭐 다가라 니디요레 디 인자 되는 덴바레스 주마 말해야지 덴바레스 디스오르다 되는 덴바세 진짜 되어야지 돈이 코로나자 담바 슬레디 동용어선 또 캠바데샤 다 데니게 동바니디 동용어스 유디게 또 바나시 된라 여바 인생 덴바 세야지
Let's look at these three particles, because if we understand each one's meaning, it will give us a clear understanding of what is meant by ultimate or final truth. So the first is dön. And so just to say, for those who know Tibetan, the first and second particle, dön and dampa, they have, in different contexts, different meanings. So of course, Genla is explaining the meaning specific to here. So here the meaning of dön is emptiness. So the first particle is empty, means emptiness. The second particle, dampa, here it means so in other contexts which has a relation, it can mean supreme or holy or sublime. So you can see a connotation there. What it means here is the very best in the sense of being unmistaken. And what? The awareness, that is the wisdom directly realizing emptiness. It is unmistaken. And amongst the unmistaken awarenesses, this awareness, which is the wisdom directly realizing emptiness, is the best, supreme, the greatest. So that's then the second particle. The first, dön, here means emptiness. Dampa then means that this wisdom, that this unmistaken awareness, that is the wisdom directly realizing emptiness, is the supreme amongst unmistaken awarenesses. Then the third particle, that of, or the third syllable rather, I keep saying particle, syllable, is denpa. Denpa is usually truth, as in two truths, four truths. So here we understand it as being in accordance that it's this wisdom that is directly realizing emptiness. It realizes reality as it is. This wisdom is in accordance with reality because it's realizing reality as it is. Hence it is a truth.
that temba mes de nawa naji mare se temba mare se le goro dadi de sha de tongba yin osun de lo nawa naji re se de re temba re la goro ga de deme re se de nawa naji mare la ro dadi ni de deme se de 제가 데메스 나와나지 말해서 다들 덴바레에서 디니 홉드갈 삼단에 디니 가와로 차기도 와 덴바레 라다 덴바 말에 동이디 덴바레에서 덴바 말에서 디니 가와레도 왔어 도발레스로 시다디 덴바 메라네 갈라 워스나 대신한 저기 유디 나가요도 러라 나도 강라마도 랑문이 주바 난고로 와 나와나시 제바체도 나와나시디 덴바 말에서 동바레에서 제가 덴바 메스데 대신 나가요도 나가요도 강라마 랑문이 주바 난고어레스 나와나시 마주바 인자 덴바 메바레 나와나시디 말에서 그거다 나와나시 강라마도 랑문이 주베 나와나신 요 말에서 제가 디 덴바 말에 나와나 유에는 덴바 차고 제가 강라마도 랑문이 주베 나와나시지 메바레 제가 덴바 메바 동바니세 덴바 메바세 디고 대시 덴바 메바세디 덴세디 로디 가르고 고선 덴바 주바지 덴신 덴지들 나와나신 딱딱 덴바 말에 문에 말에 나와나지 요 말에래 거로 제가 덴메세 디고 거래 다데 덴바 시도 된담 덴바라도 동바 용어스 별로라 나와나신 레 시고 다디디 로니데 가가 차고로 와 동바 용어스도 별로라 나와나신 다가라 레 덴바레세 덴메세디 덴바도 덴질라 나와나신 다가라 말에 덴바 말 나와나신 말에세 디고 덴메스 디라고
Let's look at this word then, true or truth. It's the same word, dempa. So we're looking at it right now. We have here ultimate truth, and then a couple lines up at the end we have not truly existent. So now in the English we have truly and truth, the same word in Tibetan, dempa. So let's then look at these two, these two terms, because it may appear that there's contradiction between the two. So to repeat what we've looked at in terms of ultimate truth, the meaning of the word truth there is that the wisdom that directly realizes emptiness is in accordance with reality because it realizes reality as it is. So that's what truth means. But then above we have not true, or not truly existent. So again, the Tibetan word truly and truth, it's the same word. So there what it means is that the way phenomena appear is that they appear to be self-existent, and a consciousness takes that to be true when it is not. It takes it, so here it takes that phenomena existing in the way that they appear is true existence. But they do not exist in this way. They are empty of existing in this way. They are not truly existent. So here, what true means is that the phenomenon appears to be true in that it appears to exist, we believe it to exist in the way that it appears. But that is truly existent. We believe it to exist, we apprehend it as existing, as in the way that it appears. That appearance seems to be true, in other words, in accordance with reality. But as we see in the second line in this paragraph, that's not the case. It's not truly existent. The way it appears is not in accordance with reality. It's empty of existing in the way that it appears. And the realization that it's empty of existing in the way that it appears, that is in accordance with reality, and that is therefore true. And that is ultimate truth.
There's not a ta me base at Denver me base, Tongbanis and Dundum Dembala, Donda Chibari, Tiso, Minka Gale Chadi, Hakotangi Chane, Kotobi, Tobi Kapsu, and the Chigi, Jumtin Kaga Tony Topic Chane, and got Minka Tayungura. Then another Kambachinala, Jimichi, Minga Levene, Chick in Mania Guanea Zutile, Chick Dinisu Zule, Chickihun Zulevene, Yonsa Mido Kahari, Yonda. Gilliard Yonta de Haga Dinashi that the Ming Da Meba said and Dempa Meba, Dongbani said, Dundum Dempa said, Ming Hakakali, Dunda Chibari, in a co Dota di Vishanji, Dota middle Tony, Chick some Dana middle Gimsen Shandaki Tony, because Dota Tony, Hako, Dogo, Benza, Ming Dian, Kaka, Chishaba, the Gimsen mother. She did it, Gimsen to share.
These different terms, selflessness, emptiness, not truly existent. So these are synonymous. Different terms are used because one may come to the same conclusion, because they're synonymous, but through different techniques, different reasoning approaches. So just like some of us we all came together in this room, some came in through the front door, some came in through the back door. So these were different approaches, but we are all together here in the room. So likewise, different synonyms are used, same meaning, but the way one gets to that meaning may be via a different approach of reasoning.
That then I Jeba Dongbani said, Dundum Demba was. Dongba Jukuro, Dundum Demba, the Shigasan, Dundabolo, and Pabe Dombani Musum to be can be more ya, Nama Nashin Dakara, Dembare, such like water. Just a dinner don't need to Dunda Dembare was. Don't you Dunda Debaiza? Don't you Horo, more you to a revesta? No, did you really hore? To a revesta.
And moving to the next section, starts with a question. In that case, since emptiness is an ultimate truth, does emptiness exist by way of its own essence? So here, the Arya being who is realizing emptiness directly, so who is in meditative equipoise, realizing emptiness directly, to them, emptiness exists in the way that it appears, and is therefore an ultimate truth. So existing in the way that it appears, does that mean it's established from its own side, established by way of its own essence? Is emptiness established or existent by way of its own essence or from its own side?
동의디 모인 유튜버 거랑 동의 거랑 모인 유튜버 레벨랍니다. 동의 거랑 모 유튜버 모인 유튜버 있나? 안에 가는 친구로서는 동반이디 강라에마도 랑원 유튜버 친구로 모인 유튜브나 디고로 와다. 강라에마도 랑원 유튜버 두고로. 지사 동반이데 강라에마도 랑원 유튜버 레벨 시고로 와다. 동반이 모인 유튜버 레벨랍디 동반이데 강라에마도 랑원 유튜브 레벨 시고로 와다.
So just before I give Genla's commentary, so what he commented on in the previous segment, since emptiness is an ultimate truth, so this is referring to the emptiness that appears to an Arya in meditative equipoise, an Arya being realizing emptiness directly, specifically that. Now, on to what Genla has just said, if that were the case, if emptiness were self-existent, the emptiness that appears directly to an Arya's meditative equipoise, if that were self-existent, existent by way of its own essence, it would mean it were independent.
동이 동반이 그런 갈라마도 랑문을 두번 진바이나 안데 가르치기를 땅을 두스로 동반이 제바서 동이 세바지와 동반이 제바 최진기 줍출람 되룩 타두 데르 세베 최진 매나 미중신 최진을 되네 최니당 아니 최니를 되네 최진 샤베스 어디 봐도 나오셨네.
Now, staying with the text. Emptiness is a way of establishment or final way of existing of the phenomenon qualified by it. Therefore, if the phenomenon qualified by emptiness does not exist, there is no emptiness of it. The empty nature of a phenomenon is established in relation to that phenomenon, and the phenomenon is established in relation to its empty nature.
최진기 줍출람 되룩 타두바 데라 서비스 대신에 가서는 최탐지기 내룩 타두바당 안에 데라 되룩 타두바 데라 안에 동반이 라기레스라와 지상 동반이 세디 최진 줍출람 되룩 타두바 데라 라고레스 디엔자 최진 매나 동리세요요 말레스 지상 매반자 동리디 최진을 뛰는 두고 용거레스 지상 동리들랑 뭐는 두바나 강라에 마도바 줍디고 호로와 지사 동이들랑 원의 주바 말레스 동이랑 원의 줍나 강라에 마도바지 용고레스 지사 동이세대 강라에 마도바 용고 말 최진의 뛰는 용고레스 그래서 최진기 내룩 타도 라면도 최진들을 뛰는 샤고로 와서 베네 bomba 내룩 타도 라면도 bom바를 뛰는 샤고로 와 디나지 최진 다 가리네 ngobodige nilu thadu le ngobole tyne sha gore jisan chujin yin nilu thadu la de dongban yin chujin nilu thadu re jisan chujin nilu thadu ne chujin de le tyne yongor ma de chujin de mena chujin nilu thadu ya yo ma des jisan dongban yin se de chujin le tyne dugu ores chujin le tyne yonggu yo ba yin sa de ba yin sa dong yin se de rang wen de ba de ma res ga la ma de ba yu de ma res ga la ma de ba de ma res jisan 동이 랑원의 주바 있나? 강라에 맞대봐 주고 그랬어. 지다 동이 있어야 돼. 강라에 맞대봐요. 말에 최선을 뛰는 용거래서.
Emptiness is a way of establishment or final way of existing of the phenomenon qualified by it. So here, this is linking to what we had in the paragraph above the question. Just this is the innermost way of existing, or the final way of abiding of all phenomena. So all phenomena, their final way of establishment, their final way of existing, the innermost way of existing is that they are empty of true existence. So when an Arya being realizes this, the way emptiness appears to them is how it exists. The appearance is in accordance with reality, because only emptiness appears. So the question then is, does emptiness exist by way of its own essence or nature? If it did so, the consequence would be, if it were truly existent, it would be independent, like any truly existent object. Because it would exist by way of its own essence or nature, it would be independent. But this is not the case. The emptiness, when one meditates on emptiness, let's say of a vase, and one realizes directly that that vase is empty of true existence, empty of existing in the way that it appears, one's only realizing the emptiness of that vase in dependence on that vase. So therefore, emptiness is not independent or self-existent, but dependent. Emptiness is a quality or characteristic of something. Therefore, it's dependent upon that something, and it cannot exist from its own side, by its own right. So therefore, there's a relationship between emptiness and the object that is empty. If there were no object, no emptiness of that object could be realized. So there is a relationship of dependency between emptiness and that object that is empty.
아니네 춘일라 되네 최신샤라스 지산 춘일라 되네 최신샤라스 지산 춘이 뭐에 라신이 마주바 가서 뭐이니스 타도 버델라 되네 최신디 샤고마도 최신 뭐이니스 타도 메나 아니 디데네스라야 말 최신데 샤야 말 베네 bomba세야지 그 bomba 코랑 뭐이니스 타도 버주에나 bomba샤야로 그 뭐이니스 타도 버샤야메나 아니 bomba세야요 말 요요 말봐 이제자 디네긴자다 춘이세다 최신을 되네 샤고래 최신세다 춘이를 되네 그런 게 니로 타도를 되네 그런 연구를해서 제가 네가 직직을 되어봐래 춘이디 최신을 되어봐래 최신이 그런 춘이를 되어봐래 되네 봐 두고래서
So that the sentence in the third line, the empty nature of phenomena is established in relation to that phenomenon, and the phenomenon is established in relation to its empty nature. So there are two parts here. Both show the mutual dependency between the object and its emptiness. The object is dependent on its empty nature. Its empty nature of that object is dependent as well on that object. So therefore, they are both mutually dependent.
아니네 최신 인술 제배 미니에바 따라서 춘이 인술 제나 니도 메베스 춘이 대양 다던 전에 미니징스.
Continuing. Just as when a phenomenon qualified by an empty nature is analyzed, it is not found, so too, when the phenomenon's empty nature itself is analyzed, it too is not found. Therefore, when one seeks an object designated as an empty nature, this empty nature is also not found.
안다 최신 인수 제배 미니에바 시대 대신 열시아들랑 안절로 뭐볼라 소바 최신 간지 로를 반나요 되깔라 랑원을 주고 갈래마다 랑원을 주고 능고래 나와나시 누구의 민도 제바체인데 갑라 나와나신직 니고 말여봐 니고 말봐 나와나시 매바 통으로마도 나와나시 요바 통고 말봐 지자 최신 인수의 집에 미니에바 따라서야 되디래
Nika Thubten Rabten.
Deji da Chuchen Yinsu Jibe Minyeba Darasela, Minyeba said Chuchen Yel Chuchen Yawar, Duji Yung Chela Soba, Dijinel Sheba Nashi, Con Kalen Nang, the Nawana, Rang when you do Nengore, Chinawana, Shin do him the Jeba Chidu, then he gave me to us. The Chuchen said Duji Chela Soba, the church. This was Karina, Nigmi to us. Dina Shin, Chunya, Yinsu Jena, Minyeba, Chunye the young, Nandu Kala Topala Nandu. Gala Mado Rangun to Nengores. Chesan Denigi Chunyi dia, Dongbani dia, Topala Na, Gala Rangun to Nengore, Nawana, Shinji, Gala Mado Rangun to be Dongbani do a Cheba Chebaina, Yayo Mares, Chibares, or Minyebe.
So looking at the first of those two sentences, just as when a phenomenon qualified by an empty nature is analyzed, it is not found. So too, when the phenomenon's empty nature is itself analyzed, it too is not found. So this then has the same meaning as the preceding sentence, which I'll read again. The empty nature of a phenomenon is established in relation to that phenomenon, and the phenomenon is established in relation to its empty nature. So this new sentence is drawing out that when one investigates, when one analyzes, not only is the object itself is found not to exist by way of its own essence, but is empty of existing by way of its own essence. So too, when the phenomenon's empty nature is analyzed, that too is not found. So both the object as well as its emptiness, neither when sought are found, neither are found to exist by way of their own nature.
China Diang, Chunye Diang, Dautun Zewe Mini Sings. China da Chunye Diang, Mother Pa Dautun Nawana, can it do the Jeba China Dautun Zenia Yomares? China Chu can it see nada? Do she Cheta, Tawata, Tombani, the Chu can it see now? Nawana, Shinji, not Topala now do, Rangun to Kalan, Mother Rangun now, Nangor, did Nawana Shin do it in Jeba China, Niagin Yomares or that.
In the next sentence, therefore, when one seeks the object designated or imputed or labeled as an empty nature, this empty nature is also not found. So this again, it's building on from what has just been said. Neither the object nor its empty nature exist from their own side, but are merely labeled.
Dongbani Nada, Dongbani Chuk, and China, Rangun to Basa Mares, that Dondala, Rangun to Baina, Gala, Madoba, or Chikuri, Gala, Shanla, Madoba Chugudi, Chuk and China, Tash and Chivets, and the Gala, Madoba, Rangun to Virginia, Mares, or the Name Buddha.
The essence of what has been presented here is that despite all phenomena, whether they are impermanent phenomena such as the vase, or permanent phenomena such as emptiness, they appear as being truly existent. But when one seeks them out, one realizes they are empty of existing truly. They do not exist by way of their own nature or essence. Because if they did, whatever that phenomenon were, it would be independent and unchanging. But no phenomenon exists by way of its own nature.
Mada and that only the Meva Reves and Ganis Meva Reves and Meva Mare only your hesin. Yena Ganis your Mada Bar Jabi Wangi, Yesam she is. Chisako Dashin Jibis and Nia Mares. Mada Majeba Lupa Shabatim your is, Jabi Wang Lupa Shabatim your body, Jabi Wangi, Yesam she is. Imbe, Timber Mess. Chesa Tongi said yours, that Tonila so check and it's in there. Tonila so bad that you may be check and it's in there. Yours, your body can see yours, and Dashin Jibits and a near your mares. Mata Macheba and a Jabi Wangi Palu Tabatsam your body, Hesur. Jabi Wangi said, Tabatsam Sigur, Tabatsam your body.
Then the final sentence in the paragraph. It merely exists through the force of worldly consensus, done without analysis. Thus, it does not truly exist. So what has been shown in the preceding lines in this paragraph is that when phenomena are sought, we come to recognize they do not exist in the way that they appear. They do not exist by way of their own nature or essence. No phenomenon is self-existent. We come to recognize this or realize this when we investigate. In this way, we come to see that phenomena do not truly exist. So how do they exist, though? Because it's not that all phenomena, as I mentioned earlier in this class, it's not that phenomena, therefore, because they don't exist in the way they appear, they are non-existent. We see here at the beginning of the sentence, phenomena merely exist through the force of worldly consensus done without analysis. In other words, merely labeled. So without analyzing, beings merely label phenomena, and in this way, they merely exist. But when one does investigate, one comes to realize they do not exist by way of their own essence or nature. They only exist, or they merely exist, through the force of a worldly consensus done without analysis.
Temper drupa me, temper drupa me, Chisada, Chekanina, temper drupa said your maris, and temper drupa, Mazula, Nawana, Kalema, the Rangun drupa, Nawan, Nashin, Yobatilla, temper drupas, or Dennis Nawan Nashin, Kalema, the Rangun, Nawan Nashin, don't tell me about the temper drupa, said Mes.
This final term we have in the expression, truly existent or not truly existent. It's good to be clear on what true existence means. If something existed truly, the way of appearing would be true, because the way of appearing would be in accordance with how it exists. But that is not how phenomena exist. Phenomena do not exist in the way they appear. They are empty of existing in the way that they appear. If they were truly existent, the appearance and the way of appearing and the way of existing or abiding would be concordant, but they are not, and therefore they are not truly existent.
Don damper drubu reves na madub la gore don damper drup sede damper drup sede don damper drup sede na jibar khonse sikhaje na damper drupa don damper drupa ne rangi ngo drupa sia ji le ho ji chasa don da jibar damper drupa la na ka la ye me do rangun drupa na wa na shin yue na damper drupa la gro chisa di na don damper drupa la na ka la ye mo do ba na wa na shin yue ba de la yue na don damper drupa la chisa don damper drup sede Dundam Dembare said, Donat Carda, Dundam Dembar, Tomba in the Donat Dembare, Tomba in the Dundamber Juba Rebel and Mares and Kavacha, the negative Kavacha Wachagore.
All phenomena are empty of existing truly, and that emptiness is an ultimate truth. So that was mentioned earlier. So all phenomena are empty of existing truly, and that emptiness is an ultimate truth. But that doesn't mean the phenomena or emptiness is an ultimate existent or exists ultimately. Emptiness, just like all phenomena, are empty of true existence. They are not truly existent, and they're also not ultimately existent. So this is good to be clear on, because some texts use the term ultimately existent. It's synonymous with truly existent. So ultimate truth and ultimate existence are not the same. So this can lead to some confusion. Ultimately existent is the same as truly existent, inherently existent, and that list of synonyms. So what's in brief here, be clear that ultimately existent does not mean the same as ultimate truth. Ultimate truth is the same as emptiness. Ultimately existent is the same as inherently or truly existent.
Alright, that is Yashana, that in my new Yablo, that in my Komuluki Tawashir Nana Deji, that don't buy the Gormashiache, and the Yashana Tiwara Donati.
We'll conclude here for this morning. This afternoon, then, we'll start with the 3 verses from Nagarjuna, with the first 2 from Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way. If you have some questions, then please do feel free to ask now.
I was just had a question last week. We were speaking about different steps in meditation when we're investigating the self, and then we talked about the first one, according to Lobsang was the self, and then the aggregates, and then phenomena. And then yesterday we were talking about it as well. And today, when Geshe was explaining, how we investigate the self and then the aggregates, is that under the investigation of the self, or is it under the investigation of aggregates?
Just repeat that last bit. Geshe today?
Yeah, today he was explaining how we kind of do this process of examination. Is that under the investigation? Because when I went home and tried to do meditation on it, when I went to examine the self, I feel like I then eventually started examining the aggregates within it, so I don't know if I was doing it correctly or not. So I just wanted clarification on what's the difference between just examining the self and examining the aggregates. And then also another question I had was, when we investigate the phenomenon, what do we focus on? Like, do we focus all phenomena in general? Is it like the aggregates, or does it depend on whatever affliction we have? Do we focus on that? What is it better to focus on?
So the first question in brief is that when we investigating the selflessness of persons and the selflessness of phenomena, do we only meditate on one, the selflessness of persons, and not the selflessness of aggregates or other phenomena? And to do with this, Geshe's explanation this morning on how to do this meditation was that in the context of meditating on the emptiness of the self or the emptiness of aggregates. And this comes from last week, where Jerry Boucher said, whilst one can meditate on in any order, he encourages one to meditate first on the selflessness of persons, thereafter on the selflessness of aggregates, and thereafter on other phenomena, external phenomena. So that was the first. And then the second is when we focus on the emptiness of phenomena, what exactly is that referring to? Is it all phenomena, or is it something more specific?
Like aggregates, or is it depending on our afflictions? Yeah.
Okay, like such as aggregates or afflictions. Okay.
Tambo Kansaki tak me di Tokyo Delare. Then di cosa then keran Selsi Nandu, Dedu Kera Kansaki tak me, Yamana Churki tak me ki kola Selsi Nansone, as it Dedu Kera Dark di Soba di Subo and Soba. Then indeed I'm not going to so Kansaki Dakme Komkyap tu, de Kansaki Dakme Chico Komkyap, Yamana Komtun de Namba, also Yang Churki Dakme Komkyap Kiyare, Chignin Sena. Then the Didi Jura Dampo, Dampo Dampo, then Nila. And also Churki Dakme Komkyap tu, then it Churtam Komkyap, Yamana Numo, Chigi Chur, Yamana Kari.
대신에 대주쇼에 쉐바데 간사 다음에 제바치단 거 쉐바래. 최기 다음에 거 쉐야마 간사 다음에. 그래서는 만tur로로 모여 송어데 그래서는 간사 된 안줄로를 간스 능기도 나이도 가다 가라이마도 랑원이도 능기도와스 디나신디 간사데 풍봉에 있는 가와도스 심지체도 갑라 먼저 간사 나와나신 간사의 유매 제바치고 그래. 제사디 간사 다음에 samnatana jeba chidang washi kore sheba yinche rwa di rwa. Da karsa gom jabdu yone? Gom chum? Chugi dame gom na rigore bes. Chida da nga chugi da nga zole 내가 다티 고스고 당보 간사 담에 섬다 디젤에 추기 담에 섬다나 디고를 가야 말 디고 검전 당보 간사 담에 이바도 추기 담에 섬다나 디고를 디겨야 말에 디고래 나 디고니 이바도 추기 담에 세지로 추기 담에 섬다도 가와tin 거라세데 디 추기 담에 세 섬다하디 당보 소수기 풍보 섬다 소수 풍보 소수기 수기 풍보 섬다 지단 소수기 풍보디 당 대신 아주 숙세다 삼단디에 숙세 네 숙세디 삼단디 네 숙세를 봐도 삼단디 갑라 다 추기다면 제바제다래다다 추기자면 제단 제바제다디 네 숙세 삼단디 네 숙세 삼로들이야 네 숙디 간스 난기도 세제 다 숙디 간라이마다 랑원이 주바 나디고래 지단 디나와 나신지 숙들이야 안에 가르스도 세 심주체도 갈라이마도 랑원이 주변 나외 예수들이 레도에 레면도세 제바지도 나중에다 파마다 된 말규다 깨래 되는 제바자 삼다이도 아니 예수들이 아니 나와나 신식 레면도세 삼다다디 추기다면 제바제다래 다디 당보가서 삼다도 소수의 수부이된도 제바체나 디 가르스네 나중에 녀모 방고 거를 제사 소수이된도 제바체고 그러지 되네 제난데 소수의 풍보디 자 직다 야고 사고서는 되네 제나 삼다선에 둠되어야 돼. 그 미버 보여서 마도 강아지 집어도 나 집어차대. 근데 그 간도 풍보디 라싱이 주베게 하고 차나 아니 그 미버 제바게마도 된다 집어 차로 그러다 레라래 또 풍보디래다 수기 풍보다 소유 풍보딩 아시스케시가야마다 소수기 난도 풍보가 나네 풍보가데 치료기 풍보하다 가서 난기 풍보 여러 받아 치료 수다 자다 신라서 받아 삼다 제자데 풍보셔야 돼 랑기 풍보에 되는 공부 그래서 다 랑기 풍보에 나네 풍보가 나네 가리때는 공부 그러려나 디 소소라랑기 데 개발 이게 말해 수기 풍보에 되는 공부 하나다 소유 풍보에 되는 삼다에 나다 디 개발 이게 말해
The meditation this morning was on the selflessness of persons. So it started out with seeing how the self appears, which is as being truly or inherently existent. And then we looked for it. So where are we going to look for it? It can only be, if it exists in the way that it appears, it can only exist within our aggregates. Because there are two places it can be found, within our physical and mental aggregates or somewhere else. So our sense of self is not out there somewhere in the world, it's here with this body and mind. So we then seek it, and we seek it by going through each of the aggregates, seeking for the self, for each of within each of the aggregates, to see if it can be found in any of the aggregates. And we did so first through looking at the faults or the contradictions, if the self were identical with the aggregates, and then we'd also look and not find it, and then the contradictions if it were unrelated, different, separate from the aggregates. So therefore, the meditation this morning was on the selflessness of persons. Then for meditators such as ourselves, meditators at our level, in the same session, meditate on the selflessness of persons, and thereafter the selflessness of phenomena. Because for us, we're not so skilled, we go through the meditation very quickly. And so then repeat it with different objects. Otherwise we're done in no time. So selfless of persons, selflessness of phenomena. And phenomena being both aggregates and external. Then to your second question, is what is meant by the selflessness of phenomena? And what to meditate on there. So here, meditate on your own aggregates, not the aggregates of someone else. And whilst one can meditate on external phenomena, because the aggregates we can understand as the inner aggregates, so our body, and the outer aggregates, forms in the world, for example. So here, meditate on one's own aggregates, and do so in the same way as for the selflessness of persons. The technique is identical. How does whichever aggregate is, whether it's a body or the feeling, so of the aggregates, you can focus on any or all. This is up to the meditator. You can start with the body, you can start with feelings, you can start with discrimination. It's up to the meditator. And you can do just the one or sequentially do all of them. See how it appears, just like the self, see how it appears, and then seek it. Look for that through thinking of the faults of if it existed in the way that it appeared, and then look for this. So for example, for the body, that it appears to be independent, but we can recognize readily that it's not. It's dependent on our parents and so many other causes and so forth. So the meditation process is the same. And as one comes to gain deeper understanding of selflessness in relation to one object, because all objects appear in the same way, and the mode of analysis, or the meditative technique, the analytical technique, is constant. As one gains greater familiarity with one object, easily apply it to others. So as we come to, for example, recognize that we may identify with our feelings, we are not our feelings. And when we gain an experience of this, we can easily apply it to others. So we don't need to focus on others. But by recognizing that I am not this, in any consciousness, there's this good quality or this bad quality, I am not either of these. And when we really recognize that, the way we identify with, for example, a consciousness or a body, this is not who we are. We can readily apply this to others. Okay?
nga sosu phungpo de samtang we kimchen ka resne nga de chi da se sosu nga le jeba jero chesa da nga se ta se ji shi di phungpo le ten ta gu do wa de phungpo khorong da na wa na shin ka nes nang du na wa de du min du jeba je phungpo le jeba je wa de de rang gi phungpo le je ho de samtang de di re di na de da phungpo nga ne da su gi phungpo de nga zo le lo le shar de wa de nga zo gi phungpo de shar de wa yo re nye la nga zo ka sa cho wa da du she da number she ba la su gi phungpo de nga zo lo le shar de wa yo re nye la je sa da dang bo su gi phungpo le je ba je sha ba ne di ji ge so cha go re.
When it comes to meditating on the aggregates, then we should meditate on our own aggregates, because our own aggregates are so connected with our sense of self. The aggregates of others are not so connected to our sense of self, and we are wanting to realize selflessness. So start with our own aggregates, or rather focus on our own aggregates. See how they appear, and do they exist in this way or not. And amongst our aggregates, you can start with or focus on any of them, but we identify so with our body, with the form aggregate. This is what readily appears to us. We identify very strongly with our bodies. So therefore this is much easier to identify how it appears, as if it is some self-existence. So therefore this is easier to start with. But again, one can, and if one's inclined, to focus on this and others too.
Okay.
Cameron?
Regarding the subject of the object of negation of the self, will the object of negation of the self over time become more subtle as the understanding of the non-inherent nature of the self improves?
As our, so just to repeat it back to you, but backwards, as our understanding of the emptiness of the self, or the emptiness of object of negation improves, does our understanding of the self appearing as being truly existent, does that become subtler? This understanding of how the self appears to be truly existent? No? Okay, say it again then, please.
I was really just talking about the object of negation of the self. Yeah. Does that over time become more subtle?
Yeah, okay. So does the object of negation over time become more subtle as we gain familiarity with this meditation? Okay.
Da chik samda de gacha de semle ya pa shaya ya anteni chile se joy de ha urwa se se urwa 가사 호론 참아 차지 고 차야스가 말아 이나다 마주 셈래 샤르디가라 아니 고 가사 되는지 라기도 셈비게 가사디 로래야 샤야라 세세고 샤샤샤도
the object of negation doesn't become subtler, it becomes clearer. So as we gain familiarity with this meditation, the object of negation becomes much clearer to us.
Okay. Yeah, that's.
Thank you very much.